The days that followed the battle were filled with quiet tension. The camp settled back into routine, but every soldier knew that the presence of the alien princess was unusual. Some still whispered doubts, while others watched from a distance, curious but cautious. Yet the soldier who had stepped forward continued to remain at her side, his calm presence a steady reassurance for both her and her child. He did not let suspicion or fear guide him. Instead, he acted with the same compassion and patience he had shown from the beginning. The princess, meanwhile, began to trust him more deeply. She learned to follow his guidance, to take small steps toward safety without fear. He taught her how to gather food, how to use simple tools, and how to navigate the human camp. She shared stories of her own world, of shining towers and endless skies, of a kingdom that had once believed in her. Though she spoke in broken words, the soldier listened patiently, asking questions and helping her find ways to explain her culture. Slowly, they began to understand each other in ways that transcended language. One evening, the soldier noticed that the princess looked worried. She clutched her baby close and stared at the horizon, her eyes filled with fear and uncertainty. "What is wrong?" he asked gently. She hesitated, unsure if she could trust him with her deepest fears. Then in a low voice she spoke. "Enemies still come. They want me, child." Her words were simple, but heavy with meaning. She explained that powerful forces in her world would stop at nothing to find her and take her child, to control the destiny of her family and kingdom. The soldier's eyes narrowed. He had always known that their safety was temporary, but the threat now seemed more real than ever. He placed a hand over hers, not touching the baby, but offering a gesture of reassurance. "We will protect you," he said firmly. "No one will harm you while I am here. You are not alone." His words were strong, but they were also gentle, carrying the promise of courage without arrogance. The princess felt a warmth in her chest that she had not felt in years. For the first time, she believed that perhaps there was someone she could truly trust. Over the next days, they prepared together. The soldier taught the princess how to hide safely if enemies came, how to move silently through the camp, and how to recognize danger before it reached them. She listened carefully, absorbing every lesson. She was not used to relying on anyone, but she began to understand that her child's safety required trust and teamwork. Together, they created plans, small strategies that could give them a chance to survive if the worst came. Despite the ongoing threat, moments of quiet happiness began to appear. The princess smiled more often, her laughter a soft sound that reminded the soldier of life beyond battlefields and fear. She watched her child grow stronger, learning to respond to gentle touches and soft voices. The baby's laughter, small but full of joy, filled the camp in ways no one expected. Even the other soldiers, who had once been suspicious, began to notice the change. Some offered small gestures of kindness, food, or blankets, though they still kept their distance. Then one day, the threat she feared became real. A group of humans loyal to those who had exiled her arrived at the borderlands. They were not the scavengers from before, but trained soldiers, disciplined and determined. They came seeking the princess and her child, believing that capturing them would restore honor to their leaders. The camp went into alert immediately, weapons drawn, hearts pounding. The princess clutched her baby tightly, trembling. She knew that if these soldiers found her, her world as she knew it would end forever. The human soldier stepped forward, his face set with determination. He looked at the princess and said quietly, "Stay behind me. I will not let them touch you or your child." He moved through the camp with authority, rallying the other soldiers and preparing a defense. The princess watched, her eyes wide, with awe and relief. For the first time, she realized that this man was willing to risk everything for her and her child, that his loyalty was not to orders or laws, but to the lives of those who had no one else to protect them. The battle that followed was tense and fierce. The new soldiers were skilled, but the camp's defenders were determined, inspired by the courage of the soldier who had stood beside the princess from the beginning. He fought with precision and bravery, shielding the princess whenever danger approached, striking down threats without hesitation. Each time an enemy came too close, he intercepted, standing firm as a human wall between her and harm. The princess watched in awe, her heart swelling with gratitude and trust. During the fight, a moment came when the princess saw one of the attackers reach for her child. Panic surged through her and she could not move. But the soldier acted instantly, leaping forward and disarming the threat. He caught her gaze, eyes filled with reassurance, and she felt her fear ease slightly. The baby's tiny hands clutched her robe, but the child sensed safety in the presence of the soldier who had already saved them many times. By the end of the conflict, the attackers were defeated or driven away. The camp was exhausted but victorious. Soldiers tended to wounds, repaired damage, and offered quiet thanks to the human soldier who had risked so much. The princess sat with her baby, her body trembling, tears streaming freely. She reached out, touching the soldier's arm gently. "You saved us," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. He nodded, his own chest tight with relief. "We saved each other," he said softly. In the days that followed, the bond between them grew even stronger. The princess no longer felt like an outsider. She learned more about human ways, adapting quickly with the guidance of the soldier. He, in turn, learned more about her world, fascinated by her stories, and amazed at her resilience. Together, they began to imagine a future that had once seemed impossible, a future where they could live without fear, where the baby could grow safely, and where trust could flourish between their worlds. The other soldiers slowly came to respect the princess, seeing her courage and the soldier's steadfast protection. Some of the whispers of doubt turned to quiet admiration. Though they still did not fully understand her, they could not ignore the strength she had shown, the way she had stayed calm and brave, even in the face of real danger. And they could not ignore the way the soldier's heart had guided his actions, showing them that courage and compassion could exist together. Finally, a moment came when the princess and her child could leave the immediate danger of the camp. Plans were made to move them to a safer location, where they could begin rebuilding a life. The soldier stood by, watching carefully, ensuring their path was clear. She took one last look at the camp, feeling a mix of relief, gratitude, and sadness. Though the soldiers had once been strangers, they had become part of her story, part of her journey toward safety and hope. As they walked together toward the future, the princess felt a sense of peace she had not known in many years. She looked at her child, now sleeping peacefully in her arms, and whispered softly, "We are safe now." The soldier walked beside her, his eyes scanning the horizon, but his heart was lighter than it had been in a long time. He knew that his choice to step forward, to act with compassion when others hesitated, had changed everything. For the first time, the princess allowed herself to dream of a life without fear. She imagined a world where her child could laugh freely, where kindness and trust were not rare, and where she and the soldier could face the future together. Though challenges would still exist, she felt ready to meet them, knowing she was not alone. The baby's soft breaths and the soldier's steady presence reminded her that courage, love, and compassion could create a life far richer than one ruled by fear alone. In that moment, everything had changed. The cry of a single child had brought together two very different worlds, two very different people. Trust had been built from fear, compassion had overcome suspicion, and hope had replaced despair. The princess, the baby, and the soldier had discovered that even in a harsh and uncertain world, one step forward, guided by heart and courage, could change the course of many lives. As the sun rose on the horizon, casting golden light across the land, the princess walked with her baby in her arms and the soldier beside her. Together they faced a future full of possibilities, a future built on trust, bravery, and the unbreakable bond of those who had chosen to care when it mattered most. And for the first time in a long while, the princess believed that the story of her life, once full of exile and sorrow, could now become a story of hope, courage, and a new beginning. The night stretched on as the princess followed the soldier toward the human camp. Her steps were slow, her body weak, but she held her child tightly, determined to keep moving. Every flicker of firelight ahead made her heart race with fear. She had heard stories of human camps, loud, rough places filled with suspicion and discipline. She knew she would be walking into a circle of strangers, none of whom had reason to welcome her. Yet the soldier at her side walked calmly, his pace steady, as if his presence alone was enough to shield her from harm. When they reached the camp, the soldiers around the fires turned their eyes toward her. Some narrowed their gaze with open distrust, while others looked away quickly, unsure how to respond. Whispers rippled through the group like a restless wind. "What is she?" one muttered. "Why is she here?" another asked. The princess understood only fragments of their words, but she caught enough to know she was not welcome. She held her baby closer, pressing her cheek against the child's soft head for comfort. The soldier guided her to a spot near the fire and motioned for her to sit. She hesitated, still unsure if this was truly safe, but exhaustion won over hesitation. She lowered herself onto the ground, her robe pooling around her as she rocked her child gently. The warmth of the fire reached her chilled skin, and for the first time in many nights she felt a small measure of relief. Still, her eyes darted around, alert to every sound, every movement. She could not afford to let her guard down completely. The captain stepped forward, his arms crossed over his chest. His voice was sharp, filled with authority. "You've brought her here," he said to the soldier. "Now explain why." The soldier stood tall, meeting his captain's eyes without flinching. "Because she is not an enemy," he replied firmly. "She is a mother. Look at her, look at the child. They need help, not suspicion." A few soldiers scoffed, shaking their heads. "We're not caretakers," one of them muttered. "We're fighters. We don't take in strays." Another added, "She could be hiding something. Maybe it's a trick." Their doubts cut through the air, and the princess could feel their mistrust like daggers aimed at her heart. She looked down at her baby, who stirred softly in her arms, and whispered soothing words. She wanted to protect the child from hearing such harshness, even though the baby could not yet understand. The soldier raised his voice, steady but strong. "Do you not hear yourselves? That is a baby in her arms. Does the child look like a soldier? Does the child look like a spy? It is innocent, and she is only trying to keep it alive." His words hung heavy in the camp, challenging every man there to look past their fear. Silence followed, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the soft coo of the child. The captain's gaze shifted to the princess. He studied her carefully, noting the strange glow of her skin, the unfamiliar patterns on her robe, and the way her eyes seemed filled with both sorrow and strength. Finally, he spoke in a quieter tone. "You have one night," he said firmly. "One night under this fire. Tomorrow we decide what happens next." His decision was not one of full acceptance, but it was not rejection either. For now, it was enough. The princess lowered her head slightly, a gesture of gratitude even if she did not fully trust his words. The soldier beside her exhaled, relief softening his features. He handed her a small piece of dried meat and another flask of water. She accepted them cautiously, sniffing the food before taking a small bite. It was tough and unfamiliar, but it filled her stomach with much-needed strength. She fed tiny drops of water to her baby, who soon drifted back into a light sleep. As the fire burned low, the camp settled into uneasy quiet. Some soldiers lay down to rest, though their eyes lingered on the princess with lingering doubt. Others whispered among themselves, debating the wisdom of allowing her to stay. Only the soldier who had stepped forward seemed at peace. He sat near the princess, not too close to alarm her, but close enough to show he was there if she needed him. His eyes remained fixed on the darkness beyond the camp, alert for danger, yet his mind wandered to the woman and child beside him. The princess, though wary, began to notice small details about him. His uniform was worn but neat, his hands calloused from work, his posture proud, but not arrogant. He carried himself like someone who had seen hardship, yet had not allowed it to turn his heart cold. She wondered why he, of all the soldiers, had chosen to help her. What made him different? What made him step forward when the others only stood still? The soldier noticed her gaze and offered a faint smile, one that reached his eyes. It was a simple expression, yet it carried warmth that eased some of the weight pressing on her heart. She lowered her eyes quickly, but inside she felt a small flicker of something she had not allowed herself in a long time: trust. The baby stirred again, letting out a soft whimper. The princess adjusted her hold, humming quietly in her language, a gentle tune that once belonged to the halls of her palace. The melody floated softly through the camp, foreign yet soothing. The soldier listened, his head tilting slightly. He could not understand the words, but the tone carried a universal meaning, a mother's love. It touched him deeply, reminding him of lullabies his own mother used to sing long ago. Hours passed and the camp grew still. The stars above sparkled brightly, casting their cold light across the land. The princess sat quietly, her baby finally asleep, her eyes heavy, but unwilling to close fully. The soldier noticed her struggle against exhaustion. Without speaking, he pulled off his cloak and laid it gently on the ground a few feet away, gesturing for her to use it. She hesitated, unsure if accepting would bind her to some hidden cost, but the tiredness in her bones urged her forward. Carefully, she lowered herself onto the cloak, cradling her baby close. For the first time in many days, she felt something close to comfort. The soldier watched over her as she drifted into shallow sleep. He knew the road ahead would not be easy. His captain's patience was thin, and his comrades' mistrust was strong. Yet he also knew, with a certainty he could not explain, that his choice had been the right one. The baby's cry had awakened something in him, something that no orders or rules could silence. As the night deepened, shadows moved at the edge of the trees. The soldier's hand reached for his weapon, his eyes narrowing. Danger still lurked in these lands. He remained vigilant, guarding not only his camp, but also the fragile bond he had begun to form with the alien princess and her child. The princess stirred slightly in her sleep, as if sensing his protective presence nearby. Though her dreams were filled with memories of betrayal and exile, there was also a new image forming in her heart, the image of a human soldier kneeling with open hands, offering food and water instead of fear. It was a memory she held tightly even in the quiet of the night. The baby shifted in her arms, sighing softly, a sound that seemed to echo peace. The soldier, watching the stars above, allowed himself a small smile. He did not know what tomorrow would bring or how the story would unfold, but he knew one thing for certain: everything had already changed. The moment he stepped forward, the path of his life, the princess's life, and the baby's life had all been tied together. And though challenges waited, so did the possibility of something far greater: trust, compassion, and perhaps even unity between two worlds that had never truly understood each other. The night went on, but within the small circle of firelight, a fragile hope burned brighter than the flames themselves. The cries of the baby grew sharper as the night deepened, a sound that could not be ignored anymore. The alien princess tightened her hold, rocking the child gently while whispering soft words in her native tongue. Her voice trembled, not only with exhaustion but with fear of what was about to happen. The bread the soldier had offered lay in her hand, still untouched, for her hunger was nothing compared to her worry for her child's safety. She lifted her eyes carefully, watching the human soldier who stood a few steps away, his posture calm, and his hands still raised in peace. Around them, the other soldiers remained hidden among the trees, their silhouettes outlined faintly by the glow of the campfires. Their whispers carried on the cold air, sharp with doubt and suspicion. Some thought this was a trap. Others wondered aloud if the princess was some kind of spy, but none of them moved forward. Only one soldier had dared to step out, and now he stood between his comrades and the frightened mother with her baby. The soldier studied the princess closely. The faint silver glimmer of her skin in the moonlight, the unusual shape of her eyes, and the strange patterns on her robe told him she was not human. Yet what struck him most was not her differences, it was her desperation. He had seen fear in battle. He had seen the hopelessness in the eyes of defeated men. But this was different. This was the fear of a mother who had nothing left except the tiny child in her arms. Something inside him stirred deeply. He could not turn away. The princess shifted uneasily, torn between running into the shadows and staying where she was. She knew that if she ran, the humans might chase her, and her child was too small to endure such a flight. If she stayed, she risked being captured, perhaps even harmed. Yet the soldier's calm eyes and gentle gesture made her hesitate. She could feel her baby's body trembling in her arms, and she knew that she could not face this world entirely alone. Perhaps fate had brought this man here for a reason. The baby let out another piercing cry, and the soldier's heart tightened. He took a slow breath, then lowered one knee to the ground, trying to appear less threatening. He placed his weapon carefully on the earth beside him, leaving it out of his reach. Then, with both hands empty, he reached into another pouch and pulled out a small flask of water. He placed it on the ground and pushed it gently toward her. He made no sudden movements, only small, deliberate actions meant to show he had no harm in mind. The princess's eyes followed the flask as it slid closer. Her throat was dry, her lips cracked, and her body weak from the long journey. But still, she did not move immediately. She whispered to her child again, stroking the soft head, trying to calm the baby's cries. The soldier waited, his patience unwavering. In that quiet moment, the baby's wails seemed to fill the night, and every sound carried a weight that touched even the hidden soldiers who watched in silence. Finally, with trembling hands, the princess bent forward slightly and picked up the flask. She sniffed the water cautiously, then touched a drop to her lips. The cool liquid soothed her throat, and her body yearned for more, but she resisted the urge to drink too quickly. Instead, she dipped her finger into the water and touched it to the baby's lips. The child responded with soft, greedy sounds, tiny mouth searching for more. For the first time that night, the cries began to quiet. The soldier exhaled slowly, relief washing over him, as the sharp cries softened into faint whimpers. The camp beyond the trees stirred with more whispers. Some of the soldiers could not understand why their comrade was helping an outsider, especially one who looked so different, but others were silently moved, though they would never admit it. The cry of an innocent child had reached them too, even if they tried to hide behind hardened expressions. Still, none of them dared disobey the captain's earlier order to stay back. Only one man had followed his heart, and he now stood alone in his choice. The princess lifted her gaze to meet the soldier's eyes. She saw no hatred there, no mockery, only quiet determination. She had expected cruelty from these humans, but what she saw was something she had not felt in a long time. Kindness. Her guard remained high, yet her heart softened just enough to let a whisper of hope enter. She carefully pulled a small cloth from her robe, wrapping it tighter around her baby to keep the child warm. Then she looked back at the soldier, and though she did not speak his language well, her eyes carried a silent question. "Why are you helping me?" The soldier seemed to understand her unspoken thought. He did not answer with words, for he knew she might not fully grasp them. Instead, he placed his hand over his heart, then pointed gently at the baby. His simple gesture said more than any speech. He was not helping because of orders, nor out of duty. He was helping because the child mattered. Because life, no matter where it came from, deserved protection. The princess felt her throat tighten with emotion. Her world had turned against her. Her people had cast her aside, and enemies had hunted her across the stars. Yet here, in this strange place, a human soldier, a stranger with no reason to care, was showing her more mercy than she had expected from anyone. She did not know if she could trust him fully, but for this one moment she allowed herself to believe that not all hearts were closed to her. The baby yawned softly, eyes fluttering as the small body relaxed. The cries faded into silence, leaving only the quiet rustle of leaves and the faint crackle of distant fires. The soldier remained kneeling, watching carefully, but not pressing closer. He could sense the delicate balance between trust and fear, and he did not wish to break it. He knew that one wrong move could send her fleeing into the darkness again, perhaps never to be seen. Behind him, his captain finally stepped forward, breaking the tense stillness. The man's voice was firm, suspicious, and edged with command. "What are you doing?" he demanded. "Step away, this could be a trick." The kneeling soldier turned his head slightly but did not rise. "It's not a trick," he replied calmly. "It's a mother, and that's her child. They're no threat to us." The captain frowned, his hand resting on the hilt of his weapon. The other soldiers shifted nervously, waiting to see what would happen. The princess's heart raced. She did not understand all the words, but she could sense the tension. She tightened her grip on her baby, ready to run if the situation turned dangerous. But the soldier raised his hand slightly, signaling for her to stay calm. He then rose slowly to his feet, turning to face his captain. "If we turn our backs now," he said firmly, "what does that make us? Are we soldiers without hearts? Or are we protectors?" His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. The camp grew quiet, the crackling fire the only sound. The captain hesitated, his sharp eyes darting between the soldier and the alien princess. Duty told him to see her as a possible enemy, but something in the air held him back. The baby's soft whimper carried once more through the silence, a sound so pure that it broke through even his hardened mind. He finally sighed, lowering his hand from his weapon. "Fine," he said reluctantly, "but this is on you. If this goes wrong, the blame is yours." The soldier nodded, accepting the weight of that responsibility without hesitation. The princess watched this exchange with cautious eyes. She could not understand every word, but she sensed that the soldier had spoken in her defense. For the first time since her exile, someone had chosen to stand between her and danger. The feeling was strange, almost unreal, but it filled her chest with a warmth she had long forgotten. The soldier turned back toward her, his expression softer now. He pointed toward the campfires in the distance, then back at her and the baby. He did not step closer, but gestured as if offering shelter. The princess hesitated, torn between her deep instinct to flee and the fragile hope that maybe safety truly existed among these humans. She looked at her child sleeping peacefully for the first time in days, and she knew she could not survive much longer on her own. Slowly, reluctantly, she gave a small nod. The soldier's eyes softened further, relief visible in his face. He extended his hand slightly, not to grab but to guide. The princess adjusted her robe, wrapped her baby closer, and rose carefully to her feet. Every step she took toward the human camp was filled with uncertainty, but also with courage. She did not know what awaited her, but she knew that something had changed forever in the moment that one soldier had stepped forward. What began as the cry of a child had now become the first fragile thread of trust between two very different worlds. And though the night was still cold, the alien princess felt for the first time in a long while that perhaps she was not entirely alone. The days that followed were uneasy for the alien princess. Each morning she woke with her baby still in her arms, and each night she lay down not knowing whether she would be welcomed the next day or driven away. The campfire gave her warmth. The food and water gave her strength, but it was the presence of the human soldier that gave her courage to stay. Without him, she knew she would have been pushed back into the cold wilderness. He had spoken for her when no one else did, and, though she barely knew his name or his world, she began to feel a quiet connection. The other soldiers remained distant. Some watched her with suspicion, whispering among themselves whenever she passed. Others avoided her entirely, refusing even to meet her eyes. The captain kept his word, allowing her to stay but never letting her forget that her place was uncertain. He reminded her often that her presence was temporary, and that at any sign of danger she and her child would be sent away. The princess listened silently, never answering back, but inside her heart ached. She wished for a home, not a borrowed place near a fire. Yet amid the cold stares and whispered doubts, the human soldier continued to show her kindness. He taught her small things about his people, how to use their tools, how to understand simple words in their language, how to share in the food they ate. She, in turn, shared pieces of her own world, speaking softly in her broken words, using her hands to explain what her language could not. Slowly, their worlds began to overlap, like two circles meeting in the middle. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with gold and red, the soldier found her sitting by herself, rocking her child gently. He sat nearby, not too close, but close enough for conversation. After a moment of silence, he asked softly, "Why are you here? Why so far from your people?" His words were slow and careful, so she could understand. She hesitated, her eyes fixed on the horizon. Painful memories stirred inside her, memories of betrayal, of being cast out, of running with her child through endless nights. She lowered her head and spoke in halting words, mixing her tongue with his. "Home. Gone. People. Not trust. I. Run." She pointed at her baby. "For child." Her voice broke as she spoke, and though her words were few, they carried the weight of a broken life. The soldier's chest tightened as he listened. He did not need perfect words to understand her story. He could see it in her eyes, the loneliness, the loss, the desperate hope that her child might have a better life than she had been given. He reached down and picked up a small stone, rolling it in his hand. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "home is not where you were born. Sometimes it is where someone cares enough to stand with you." He tossed the stone gently into the fire, where it sparked and vanished into the flames. She looked at him, not fully understanding all his words but feeling the warmth of their meaning. Her lips curved in the smallest of smiles, and for the first time she whispered his name, slowly, carefully, as if testing the sound. The bond between them grew stronger in ways the others could not see. Each time she smiled at him. Each time, he offered food without asking anything in return. Trust began to replace fear. He no longer saw her as an outsider. He saw her as a mother, a woman carrying a heavy burden. And she no longer saw him as a soldier of a suspicious people. She saw him as a protector, a man who chose kindness even when it was not the easy choice. But peace in the camp was fragile. Rumors began to spread. Some soldiers muttered that the princess was a danger, that she carried secrets that could harm them all. Others warned that if enemies discovered they were harboring her, the entire unit could be destroyed. The captain listened to these whispers, and though he had not yet acted, his patience was running thin. One night, danger came not from within, but from beyond. As the moon rose high, shadows moved along the edge of the camp. The soldier on watch raised a quiet alarm, and soon weapons were drawn. The princess woke to the sound of men rushing to their positions, the baby stirring in her arms. Her heart pounded as she held the child close, unsure of what was happening. The soldier who had befriended her appeared at her side, his weapon ready, his eyes sharp. "Stay close," he whispered firmly. Figures emerged from the trees, raiders, armed and ruthless. They were not human soldiers, but a band of scavengers who preyed on the weak and the lost. They had heard of the strange woman traveling with a child and had followed the whispers of her presence. To them, she was a prize, an alien princess with value beyond measure, and a child whose future was unknown. The battle broke out quickly, steel clashing against steel, shouts echoing into the night. The princess crouched low, shielding her baby, with her body trembling as chaos raged around her. She wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. The soldier fought fiercely, standing between her and the attackers. He struck down one raider, then another, his breath heavy, but his resolve unshaken. Every time an enemy tried to push toward her, he was there, a wall of strength and protection. The baby began to cry, the sound cutting through the noise of battle. The princess rocked the child desperately, tears in her eyes. She hated feeling so helpless, hated that she could do nothing but hold her baby close. But as she looked up, she saw the soldier standing tall, his body a shield, his eyes blazing with determination. And for the first time, she did not feel completely powerless. She had someone willing to fight for her. The raiders pressed harder, and the camp shook with violence. The captain barked orders, his soldiers pushing back against the wave of attackers. At one point, a raider broke through the line and rushed toward the princess. Her heart froze as the figure loomed closer. But before the blade could fall, the soldier intercepted, striking down the threat with a fierce cry. He turned, breathless, and met her eyes. In that moment, no words were needed. She understood that he had chosen not just to fight, but to fight for her. At last, the raiders were pushed back, retreating into the trees when they realized the camp was too strong. The ground was littered with broken weapons and signs of struggle, but the humans had held their ground. The camp slowly quieted, the soldiers gathering their strength, tending to the wounded. The princess sat trembling, clutching her baby tightly, her tears wetting the child's soft hair. The soldier knelt before her, his face tired but alive, his hands steady as he reached out, not to take, but to reassure. "It's over," he said softly. "You're safe." She looked at him with wide eyes, her heart pounding with gratitude. Without thinking, she reached out and touched his arm, a small gesture, but one filled with meaning. She whispered softly, "Thank you." That night, as the camp repaired its defenses, the captain approached the soldier. His tone was harsh, but his eyes held a flicker of respect. "You risked much for her," he said. "If she brings danger again, it will not be easy to defend, but—" He paused, glancing at the princess and her baby, who slept peacefully at last. "Perhaps you were right. Perhaps she is more than what we first thought." It was not full acceptance, but it was a crack in the wall of suspicion. The soldier nodded, saying nothing. He knew trust was not easily earned, but he also knew that the first steps had already been taken. The princess, for her part, began to feel something she had not known in many days, a sense of belonging, fragile, uncertain, but real. She had not expected to find safety among humans, but now, in the presence of this one soldier and the camp that tolerated her, she saw a path she had never imagined. As dawn broke, painting the sky with light, the princess sat with her baby, watching the soldier sharpen his blade for the next day. She whispered softly to her child, her voice filled with quiet hope. She spoke of the man who had stepped forward when no one else would, who had fought not for glory, but for them. The baby, too young to understand, gazed up with innocent eyes. Yet somehow the child's calm expression seemed to carry the promise of a new beginning. In that fragile dawn, something had changed forever. Trust, once a distant dream, had begun to take root. The soldier and the princess, so different in blood and in world, had found in each other the strength to face what lay ahead. And though the road before them was still filled with shadows, they walked it together, bound by the cry of a child and the courage of a single step forward. The night was cold and quiet, the kind of silence that makes even the strongest hearts feel small. Far from her home, the alien princess walked slowly across rough ground, her long robe torn and her steps heavy. She carried her baby close to her chest, trying to shield the tiny child from the sharp wind. The baby's soft face pressed against her shoulder, and every now and then a faint cry escaped the little mouth. Each cry echoed into the emptiness of the night, bouncing off the stones and trees, reminding the princess of how truly alone she was. The princess had once lived in a palace of shining towers and glowing lights. She had been surrounded by servants, guards, and family. Her people respected her not only because of her royal blood, but because she carried the promise of their future. Yet all of that had been taken away from her. Betrayal had cut deeper than any sword. Her throne was stolen, her name marked with false blame, and she was forced to run for her life. She did not run alone. She ran with her baby, the last symbol of her true place in the universe. The child was small, helpless, and innocent. But to her, the baby meant everything. Every step she took was for the tiny life she cradled so carefully. She had been traveling for days with almost no food or water. Her strength was fading. The land she walked on was not her own. It belonged to humans, creatures she had only heard about in stories. Some stories painted them as brave and kind, others as harsh and suspicious of anyone different. She did not know which was true, but she knew she had little choice. She could not return to her people, and she could not stop moving. Her only hope was that somewhere in this strange land she would find a place to rest, even if just for a short while. The baby stirred and cried louder, The sound cut through the air like a signal flare. The princess quickly looked around, afraid the cries would bring danger. She whispered gentle words in her own language, rocking the baby softly. But hunger had made the little one restless, and no amount of rocking could silence the need for milk and warmth. The princess's heart ached. She wished she could give her child the comfort of a home, the safety of family, and the peace of quiet sleep. Instead, all she had was her arms and her love. Far away on the other side of a cluster of trees, a group of human soldiers were camped. They had built small fires to keep away the night's chill. Most of them sat in silence, sharpening their weapons or staring into the flames. Their mission was to guard the borderlands, to keep watch for any threat. They were trained to stay alert, to trust no one, and to strike first if danger appeared. They were not used to mercy. Mercy was not part of their orders. Yet in that stillness, they all heard it. The faint cry of a baby carried by the wind. At first they looked at each other with confusion. Some frowned, thinking it was only the wind playing tricks, but as the cries grew clearer, more human-like, they began to murmur among themselves. A baby? Here, in the borderlands? It did not make sense. There were no villages nearby. Who would bring a child into such a dangerous place? The captain of the group ordered them to stay in formation. It could be a trap, he warned. The enemy uses tricks to lure us out. Stay ready. The soldiers nodded, though unease spread among them. The sound was too real, too raw to be a trick. Some of them shifted uncomfortably. They were men hardened by war, but even they were not blind to the innocence in a baby's cry. Among them stood one soldier who listened more closely than the rest. He was not the strongest in the group, nor the loudest, but he carried something the others often tried to hide: compassion. He could not ignore the sound. Something inside him stirred, a feeling he could not explain. It was as if the cry was calling not only to his ears, but to his very heart. He thought of his own family far away, of his little sister who had once cried in the night when she was small. The memory made the sound even harder to ignore. The captain repeated his order: stay still, do nothing. But this soldier found his feet moving on their own. He rose quietly, earning sharp looks from his comrades. Where are you going? One of them whispered harshly. The soldier hesitated, then said in a low voice, I just need to see. That's not the sound of danger. That's a child. The others shook their heads, some in disapproval, others in quiet fear. But the soldier kept walking, each step careful, each movement deliberate. Something deep inside him told him he had to go. On the other side of the trees, the princess had crouched low, trying to calm her baby. She heard voices now, strange voices in a language she understood only a little. Panic gripped her heart. She pulled the baby closer, wrapping her robe around both of them. She knew if these humans found her, they might harm her or take her child away. She could not let that happen. She had already lost too much. But before she could decide what to do, she saw a figure emerge from the shadows. It was a human soldier, tall and broad-shouldered, with a weapon at his side. His steps were slow, careful, not rushed like an attacker. The princess froze, every muscle tense, ready to run if she had to. Her baby let out another cry, and the sound seemed to soften the soldier's eyes. He stopped a few feet away, raising his empty hands to show he meant no harm. The princess did not move, but her heart pounded. She could see the firelight behind him, the silhouettes of other soldiers watching. But this one had stepped forward alone. For a long moment, neither spoke. The soldier looked at her, at the baby in her arms, and something shifted in his expression. He saw not an enemy, not a threat, but a mother struggling to protect her child. The princess saw his gaze, and though she remained cautious, she noticed the absence of hatred. That gave her a tiny sliver of hope. The baby's cries began to soften, as if sensing the change in the air. The soldier slowly reached into a small pouch at his side and pulled out a piece of bread. He broke it in half and held it out, not stepping closer but letting her see the offering. His gesture was simple but powerful. The princess's eyes widened. She had expected weapons, not food. Her stomach tightened with hunger, but she did not reach out. Trust did not come easily, not after all she had suffered. Yet her baby's tiny face reminded her that sometimes even a fragile chance must be taken. The soldier waited patiently, his hand still extended, his eyes calm. The princess studied him, searching for lies, for hidden cruelty. But all she saw was quiet sincerity. Her heart whispered that maybe, just maybe, this man was different. She slowly shifted the baby in one arm and reached out with trembling fingers. She took the bread and clutched it close, not eating yet, but accepting the gesture. For the first time in many days, she felt the faint stirrings of something she thought she had lost completely: hope.